In this episode, we are looking at a subject that feels exciting to many organizations, but also makes auditors and risk professionals slow down and ask harder questions. And that subject is evaluating risks of emerging technologies and practices. New learners often hear the word emerging and think only about futuristic devices or dramatic inventions. But in a business environment, the idea is broader and more practical than that. A technology or practice can be considered emerging simply because it is new to the organization, not yet fully understood, or being adopted faster than the control environment around it can adapt. That matters because information technology, IT, changes quickly, and businesses often feel pressure to move fast in order to gain efficiency, reduce cost, improve service, or keep up with competitors. The opportunity can be real, but so can the risk, especially when something powerful enters the environment before leadership has clearly defined ownership, use boundaries, security expectations, and operational safeguards. That is why this topic matters so much in auditing. The goal is not to fear innovation, but to evaluate whether innovation is being introduced in a way that creates value without quietly building new weaknesses underneath the surface. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful place to begin is by defining what makes a technology or practice emerging in the first place. It does not have to be globally new, and it does not have to be experimental in a laboratory sense. It can be a cloud service, an automation method, a data sharing model, a development approach, or a decision support tool that is still early in adoption inside the organization or the industry. In many cases, the technology itself may already be established in the market, but the practice around it may still be immature in the company using it. That distinction is important because risk often comes less from novelty alone and more from unfamiliarity, incomplete governance, and untested assumptions. A company may adopt a platform that works well elsewhere and still create significant problems if its own staff, policies, data, and support processes are not ready. Auditors therefore evaluate emerging technologies and practices with a practical mindset. They are asking whether the organization understands what is being introduced, why it is being introduced, how it changes the risk picture, and whether the environment around it is strong enough to support responsible use. One reason this area is especially important is that emerging technologies and practices often arrive with momentum. Leaders may hear strong vendor claims, business units may be eager to gain speed, and technical teams may see clear efficiency benefits in adopting something new. All of that can be legitimate, but momentum can hide weak analysis if the organization starts assuming that faster adoption is automatically better adoption. When the pressure to modernize grows, governance sometimes gets treated like an obstacle rather than a discipline that protects value. As a result, new solutions may enter production before data handling is understood, before support roles are defined, before access models are reviewed, or before downstream dependencies are recognized. Auditors care because that pattern is common. The organization is not failing because it wants to improve. It is failing because it may be moving faster than its ability to govern the change. Emerging technology risk is therefore often a timing problem as much as a technical one. The promise arrives early, while the control maturity needed to support that promise arrives later, and that gap is where many of the most important issues begin. It also helps to remember that emerging technologies and practices come in many forms. Some are clearly technical, such as artificial intelligence, AI, Internet of Things, IoT devices, advanced automation tools, low-code development platforms, cloud-native architectures, and increasingly connected data ecosystems. Others are more about the way work is done, such as DevOps operating models, continuous delivery habits, decentralized decision-making in technology teams, heavy reliance on external platforms, or business-led technology development outside traditional IT channels. These are not all risky in the same way, and that is one of the most important beginner lessons. The organization should not treat every new development as equally dangerous or equally beneficial. The real task is to understand what kind of change is happening and what new dependencies, control expectations, and uncertainty come with it. A new tool that speeds up document drafting does not create the same concerns as a new AI system influencing credit decisions. And a connected sensor platform in a building does not create the same risk picture as a low-code application handling sensitive financial approvals. Good evaluation begins with seeing the difference. From there, a broad view of risk becomes essential because emerging technologies and practices rarely affect only one area. Security risk may increase if the new capability expands the attack surface, changes access patterns, or introduces hidden weaknesses. Privacy risk may grow if the tool collects, infers, stores, or shares personal information in ways the organization has not yet controlled. Operational risk may rise if the technology is difficult to support, poorly documented, or dependent on a small number of specialists. Compliance risk may appear if laws, contracts, or industry obligations have not been fully mapped to the new environment. Financial risk can follow if the organization invests heavily before understanding total cost, renewal exposure, or the effort required to maintain the solution over time. Reputational risk also matters, especially when a visible innovation produces biased outputs, unreliable decisions, public failure, or a loss of trust among customers and employees. Auditors evaluate this area well when they resist the temptation to reduce it to one technical issue and instead look at how the new capability changes the organization's overall risk profile. Uncertainty is one of the defining features of emerging technology risk, and that makes evaluation a little different from more mature control areas. With older and more established environments, management often has years of history, known standards, stable support models, and well-understood control patterns. With something newer, the organization may be working with limited internal experience, fast-moving vendor roadmaps, incomplete regulation, uncertain performance claims, and unclear long-term operating requirements. That does not mean the organization should avoid new technology until everything feels certain, because that moment may never come. It does mean leaders should be honest about what they do not yet know. Auditors pay attention to this because false confidence is often more dangerous than clear uncertainty. If management acts as though a new platform is fully understood when it is not, then the organization may skip the reviews, pilots, training, and contingency planning that would normally reduce risk. Mature evaluation does not punish uncertainty. It asks whether uncertainty is being recognized, documented, and governed responsibly rather than hidden behind optimism. Business alignment is another core part of the evaluation because not every emerging capability deserves adoption simply because it is popular or technically impressive. The organization should be able to explain the business problem it is trying to solve, the outcome it expects, and why the new technology or practice is a reasonable fit for that need. When this clarity is missing, risk increases quickly. A tool may be adopted because competitors are using similar terms, because a vendor demonstration was persuasive, or because one internal team wants to experiment without defining what success would actually look like. In those cases, the organization may end up carrying new risk without gaining meaningful value. Auditors therefore want to see whether management can connect the adoption to strategic goals, operational efficiency, service improvement, resilience, or other concrete business needs. Strong alignment helps the organization make better decisions about scope, controls, and investment. Weak alignment often leads to experimentation without discipline, which may produce scattered tools, duplicated effort, and technology that seems innovative but does not truly improve how the business operates. Governance and ownership also become especially important when something new enters the environment. One of the easiest ways for emerging technology risk to grow is for nobody to be clearly responsible for setting rules, monitoring use, approving changes, and responding when problems appear. This is common when a technology crosses traditional boundaries. A business unit may sponsor it, a technology team may deploy it, a vendor may host it, and security, privacy, legal, and compliance teams may all assume someone else is handling the hard questions. Auditors look carefully at this situation because unclear ownership often sits underneath later failures. A strong environment identifies who owns the business risk, who owns the technical implementation, who defines acceptable use, who approves exceptions, and who has authority to stop or redesign the initiative if risk becomes too great. Ownership does not mean one person performs every task. It means the organization can point to accountable roles that can make decisions and answer for the results. That clarity matters even more when the technology is new, because uncertainty without ownership usually leads to drift, delay, and unmanaged exposure. Data considerations deserve their own careful attention because many emerging technologies and practices depend heavily on data quality, data access, and data movement. A system may generate predictions, automate actions, surface patterns, or personalize outcomes based entirely on the information it receives. If that information is incomplete, biased, stale, overexposed, or poorly governed, the outputs can become misleading even when the technology itself appears to function correctly. This is especially visible with AI and advanced analytics, but the principle extends far beyond those areas. Connected devices, automated workflows, and new integration models all rely on data that must be understood, protected, and controlled. Auditors evaluate whether the organization knows what data is being used, whether it has the right to use it that way, whether sensitive information is being handled appropriately, and whether output quality depends on assumptions that management has not tested carefully enough. A new capability may look accurate in a demonstration but fail badly in real operations because the underlying data environment was never ready to support it. That is why data governance and emerging technology risk are so tightly linked. Third-party dependence and supply chain exposure also expand quickly in this area. Many emerging tools and practices arrive through outside providers, managed platforms, specialized vendors, or external code and service ecosystems that the organization does not fully control. The technology may seem modern and efficient, yet its resilience, privacy posture, subcontracting arrangements, support quality, and long-term viability may still be unclear. In some cases, the organization may become dependent on a provider faster than it realizes, especially when the new service integrates deeply into core operations or stores important business information. Auditors study these dependencies because risk does not stop at the product feature list. It extends into contract terms, service changes, vendor stability, data portability, incident handling, and the organization's ability to continue operating if the provider fails, changes direction, or becomes unacceptable from a control standpoint. A mature evaluation does not assume that a widely used external service is automatically low risk. It asks whether dependence is understood well enough that the organization could manage disruption, change, or exit without major damage. Operational resilience and integration questions are just as important as the initial decision to adopt. A new technology might work well in a pilot or limited setting, but create serious strain once it connects to real business processes, legacy systems, user workflows, and support expectations. It may require skills the organization does not yet have, maintenance patterns that do not fit existing teams, or response procedures that nobody has defined. Emerging practices can create similar problems. A faster development model may improve delivery speed while weakening documentation, testing discipline, or production oversight if the organization does not adapt its control model at the same time. Auditors therefore evaluate not only the technology itself, but the ability of the organization to run it well after the excitement of adoption fades. That includes support readiness, incident handling, training, continuity planning, change control, and compatibility with the rest of the environment. If the organization cannot sustain the new capability in daily operations, then the innovation may create more fragility than value, no matter how promising it looked during early rollout. Control design for emerging technologies and practices usually works best when it is staged, thoughtful, and realistic. The organization does not need perfect certainty before trying something new, but it does need reasonable safeguards that fit the level of risk. That may include limited pilots, defined use cases, approval checkpoints, monitoring of output quality, stronger access restrictions, data minimization, human review over automated decisions, fallback processes, and formal review before expansion to wider business use. Auditors appreciate this staged approach because it shows management understands how to learn without gambling recklessly. A common mistake is scaling too quickly after a small success, assuming that if the tool worked in a narrow test, it must be ready for broader dependence. In reality, Wider use often introduces new data types, new users, new error conditions, and new control needs. Good evaluation looks for whether controls grow along with adoption. It is not enough to approve the technology once and move on. Emerging capability should be revisited as it matures, because the risk picture often changes as real-world use expands. There are also several common misconceptions that beginners should clear away. One is the belief that newer automatically means better, safer, or more efficient. Sometimes that is true, but newness by itself is not a control strength. Another misconception is that risk evaluation should happen only after the technology proves successful, as if governance can wait until value is obvious. In practice, delayed evaluation often means delayed recognition of problems that could have been reduced much earlier. A third misconception is that if a vendor handles most of the technical complexity, the organization's own risk must be smaller. Often the opposite is true. External convenience can make internal visibility weaker if responsibilities are not defined clearly. Auditors also see organizations assume that pilot use is low risk by default, when in reality a poorly governed pilot can still expose sensitive data, create hidden dependence, or normalize behavior that later becomes hard to control. These misconceptions matter because they make emerging technologies feel simpler than they really are, and simplicity is often where risk enters unchallenged. From an audit perspective, evaluating risks of emerging technologies and practices means gathering enough evidence to determine whether the organization is introducing innovation with deliberate thought rather than enthusiasm alone. The auditor may review business cases, pilot plans, data use descriptions, ownership mappings, vendor materials, governance records, risk assessments, support models, training plans, exception approvals, and evidence of how outcomes are monitored after adoption begins. Interviews with business and technical stakeholders often reveal whether people truly understand why the technology is being used, what the main risks are, and who is accountable when concerns arise. A strong environment usually shows clear business purpose, staged adoption, defined ownership, realistic awareness of uncertainty, and controls that match the sensitivity of the use case. A weaker environment usually shows unclear objectives, rushed deployment, heavy vendor reliance without enough scrutiny, and a pattern where enthusiasm outruns governance. The central question is not whether the organization is innovative enough. It is whether innovation is being introduced in a way that remains governable, supportable, and aligned with the business's real risk tolerance. As we close, the main lesson is that evaluating risks of emerging technologies and practices is really about asking whether the organization can embrace change without surrendering judgment. New tools and new ways of working can create major benefits, but they also change the control environment, create unfamiliar dependencies, and test whether governance can keep pace with ambition. Strong evaluation does not reject innovation, and it does not celebrate it blindly. It helps the organization see where uncertainty, data exposure, operational strain, weak ownership, or outside dependence could turn a promising idea into a serious problem. When this area is handled well, the business gains a better chance to learn, improve, and modernize without losing sight of security, resilience, accountability, and trust. When it is handled poorly, the organization may discover too late that the most attractive part of the new capability was also the part that hid the most risk. For a new learner, that is the durable takeaway. Emerging technologies and practices should be evaluated not by how new they are, but by how responsibly the organization understands, governs, and sustains them once they become part of real business life.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.